a lot of companies are just rushing for that stage moment, like a big flashy announcement, a PR moment, a press release that gets you on a first
I
page
feel
or
very targeted right now. I gotta tell you, the promise of AI is real. So is the challenge of making it work in your organization. Welcome to The Path Forward, where we explore the future of work in the age of AI. I'm Christian Potts, your host. Pleased to be joined today by Simi Gupta and Andrada Morar from UiPath. We're going to be talking today about how do you scale with confidence? How do you actually make your organization meet the bar that you need to hit so that you can affect the AI transformation you're looking for? So the first few episodes, we've been talking about what's the orchestration moment that we're in? What is this AI moment that we're in? We've also been talking about what's the experience like if you're looking to apply this to a really complex process in your business, a process that actually drives your business every day, like revenue cycle management, for example. We've also had Daniel come in and talk about sort of like his vision for like the kind of ways you'd sort of need to chart the path towards where we're going. And we're going to talk about people later. I'm really excited about that conversation that's going to be coming. But today, what I really want to focus on is like, what does this actually look like in the kind of complex environments that our customers are in every single day? So like financial services or healthcare. In this case, we have an expert here on financial services, so that's probably where we're going to go first. But I want to start this episode, Andrada, by asking you a question, which is, when you talk to customers in a role that you're in, you're sort of you're the VP of customer experience for us. You really have that close relationship to them. When you talk about trust and confidence with them, what are the biggest concerns? What are the things that are keeping them up at night?
Yeah, so I think it changes a lot, right? Like I would probably dare to say probably it will change before this podcast actually airs.
Yeah.
If you look at the past month, like conversation has changed a lot from what is a model actually able to do to what am I actually comfortable to allow a model to do for me, an agent to do for me. So I think like there are three themes that I've seen emerging in the past, let's just say like weeks and maybe months. I don't dare to go even more back in time. But the first one is this idea of boundary. Like it's one to work with a model to draft an email, and it's something completely different to allow an agent to make a really big decision like denying or saying yes to a claim or sending something to a regulator. So I think like it depends also from enterprise to enterprise, like where that boundary is.
Yeah.
I think also audit is another big thing. It goes beyond whether AI was right to make a decision or not, and it goes more into, I want to know what made AI make that decision. Was there a human involved? What kind of content was used to allow the model to make a change? So like audit is a big thing. And then I think like one that a lot of actually like vendors don't say it out loud, but it's truly like the institutional risk of moving too fast. I think we've all heard the stories where you have a pilot that works wonderfully in a sandbox, but when it comes to actual production, it can be pretty disastrous if you don't do proper homework and don't do a lot of testing and don't ensure that what you see in a shiny box actually works in the real world.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to hear you describe that, because I think that there is certainly those considerations. You're talking about adoption, but I think another piece, and we touched on this in a conversation we had with Daniel, is what's the ecosystem that you're trying to build if you are someone who's thinking about actually deploying this? Like, there are the things that keep you up at night, obviously, but there's a host of other people that you can work with. And by people, I mean like companies, hyperscales, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about that ecosystem, what is the right mix? And more importantly, what is the wrong mix when it comes to how you should think about building that ecosystem?
Yeah, so I think like the transition we are in right now with the market, because of the speed of development, what you see happening, a lot of companies are just rushing for that stage moment, like a big flashy announcement, a PR moment, a press release that gets you on a first page.
I feel very targeted right now. I got to tell you,
or
I'm the comms guy here. Don't
or
forget.
the X community, like just talking about that one announcement. But truth is, it goes beyond that. And I think like what's happening right now in the market is actually creating a lot of confusion for customers. When you have so many different vendors from so many different angles claiming to do the same exact thing, it creates a lot of confusion. And with that confusion comes also a lot of duplication for customers, right? So what I always think, like if I approach a GSI or a tech alliance partner, I always start with what's the honest stake that we can have together for our customers? Like where are we honestly the best in? and where is the boundary or the handoff between the tech alliance ecosystem, because you need the best model, you need the best cloud provider, but you also have like a unsexy part of an enterprise, and your data can be really messy, and you need a data partner in that can help you figure it out, And there are still some that are simply like not in a place to be so ultra modern and agentify everything, and it's just all too messy. So when you have all the vendors claiming that they can do the same thing, what happens is like either customers make compromises, and instead of having the whole 100% of the work getting done by bringing all the partners at the table, because there are vendors who are like, oh no, I think I can go a bit further and I can do this part, the customer will be left with 70% of the work actually done, and probably done at a mostly costly basis.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, in the conversation with Daniel about sort of like the moment, we explored this idea of if you make the wrong decision has so many different sort of aspects to it. And this is where I'm really interested in like what do you have to say about this, Simi? Because if you think about the wrong answer, there's the wrong answer that leads to you have too much technology, you have too much debt, you have all this stuff that's just like littered all over your stack. And you're just, like I said, 70% of that maybe you're using is 30% that probably is costing you like a couple $1 million you're just never using. But there's also the other risk, which is what happens if you are not thinking about the regulatory concerns, compliance concerns. So thinking about that angle. So Simi, for you, we talked about confidence. When you're dealing with like companies in the financial sector, these companies who are heavily regulated, who have a lot of compliance concerns, who are thinking every day about how am I protecting my data, how am I protecting my systems, how am I protecting my customers, how am I protecting like my bottom line? What are they thinking about when they want to apply AI with confidence? And more importantly, like what are the sort of like the first principles that they can look to act on to make sure that when they're doing that, they're doing it in the right way?
Good question. Chris, what I'll start by saying is this is the right question. Because what I challenge is questions like how can we apply AI with confidence? It is usually heard in a different way. Mostly people hear that is AI good enough yet? Right? And that's a model question. That's in regulated environments, model is rarely a bottleneck. So I would start with 3 principles. Principle number 1 is confidence is engineered. It is not discovered. By that, what I mean is you don't wait to feel comfortable with the model, or you don't go out and shop around for a better model and feel confident about it. Confident is manufactured by building the operational scaffolding around it. That is, what are the controls? What is the traceability? What are the human touch points? What the model can do? Those are the kind of things just so that you can deploy it accountably. Right? So confidence is manufactured, not found. So the second thing which I want to focus on is orchestration is the governance to execute. By that, what I mean is that your policy cannot be living in a PDF which nobody reads, right? It has to be enforced within the systems so that you can make sure that what is running, on what data it is running, who is signing off on it, and within what limits, right? And the third and the last point is the goal was never autonomous AI. The goal was accountable AI, right? So every decision should be reconstructible. And as far as regulators are concerned, they'll say it did not happen if you can't reconstruct it, right? So finally, to answer your question, where do I start? Definitely never the model. So where do I start is, I say usually I start at the end. What that means is, what has to be true today for me to be able to understand the decision and make the auditors understand why I made this decision, right? And from there, you start building backwards, right? And the moment you do that, you will realize that the confidence lifts up or stops from becoming a leap of faith and starts becoming more understandable and starts becoming an engineering problem. And we all are good at solving engineering problems.
I really love that answer because I think it puts something very sharply into focus, which is this: you can't mistake this moment for shiny object syndrome. You can't just run to a model because you think the model, to the point Andrada was making earlier, that it looks like the right one because it's flashy or because it's branded the right way or whatever. Like, you really have to take a hard look at like, what is the infrastructure that you're looking to build around this, and then make a model decision. So in that vein, why is orchestration then so hard? Why is that specifically the hardest part?
What I would start by saying is model used to be the hardest part, right? Previously. It isn't anymore. These days with large organization, model is just a procurement decision. You can go out and find a really amazing model which operates to the best of its capabilities this afternoon. What you cannot find is the answers to what it is allowed to do, on what data, within what limits, and who is accountable of when it acts, right? So that's all orchestration. So what is orchestration? It is the layer which sits between the model can do this and we are allowed to do this. And within regulated environments, that gap is enormous, right? So let me give you an example. A single workflow can touch customer data, can touch a core banking application, can touch a third-party system, and can even have a human sign-off, right? So in all of that, the intelligence in any of that step is, let's say, 10%. The remaining 90% is the coordination, is the guardrails, is the audit trails across it, right? I have a very simple analogy to give around here, which I really like. Like, model is the engine, right? But the orchestration is the brakes, the steering wheels, the instrumental panel. And nobody is impressed with a car which performs really amazing but does not have the brakes. In our world, we cannot even get that to road, right? So what I would say is, when people get obsessed over model, I would like to, kind of get them back and ground them on that model is not where your risk is living. Model isn't where your advantage is living. Both of them are living in the orchestration layer, and that's the reason it is hard.
Yeah.
Right.
I like that idea because it kind of gets back to the question I asked you, Andrada, about the ecosystem. Because I think that when you think about sort of like and I love the car analogy, by the way, for a couple of reasons. Number one, my daughter just got her license, so that's a whole other discussion. But what I really like about that is it really does like speak to this whole, like, there's almost like this assembly line approach where the parts start moving down the line, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, as I build this, how do I need to layer these pieces in bit by bit, piece by piece, so that when I get to the end, the car that is at the end of the assembly line looks like the one that is showed at the Detroit Auto Show, or that's in a glossy brochure or whatever. Yeah. So thinking about this from an ecosystem standpoint, how often do you think, when people are thinking about like building this, whether it's like an ecosystem just for you or like an ecosystem for an industry, how often do you think people are sort of following this idea of like start with outcome and work your way backwards?
I actually think that's the healthy way to think about it. We were just talking like what's happening now in the market. It's chasing that flashiness, but actually where I do see most of the success is when the conversation doesn't start with which model we should use, which orchestration we should use, which cloud provider. It's mostly more like, this is the challenge I need to fix today. How do I get the solution to production? And that's where every single player has a role to play, because you need the latest like world-class model that can help with that, but you also need the cloud provider, you need the data, you need the orchestration, and you need a GSI to actually make it work in the way a certain enterprise operates. Because I think like that's where the bottleneck is. You can adapt the best technology, but if it doesn't fit in the way a company operates, you're not gonna get to production.
Yeah. And it really sets up, I think, a question I want to ask you, Simi, which is, when you're talking to these customers, when they're thinking about they're making these decisions about building their car, who's at the table and who should be at the table? So I think the idea is like, it used to be when you're adopting cloud, think back to things like when people first started using email, to when people first started using cloud services, and they started rolling out SaaS into their business. Primarily an IT decision. Risk was involved, yes, compliance was primarily an IT decision. But because this touches so much, who needs to be at the table for this decision?
That's a great question, because the wrong answer would be if I give you any one of them. That'll be definitely a wrong one. The failure mode, which I see mostly in our customers, is when we treat ownership as a hot potato. That means whoever gets stuck holding it owns it. And that is where you get agents which nobody fully understands, and they can very easily, kind of disown it when anything goes wrong. Right? So deliberately, very, very deliberately, I would say the ownership is a very layered model which you need to put in place. What that means is the business owns the outcomes. That means, what does the agent do and what does good look like for this agent? The IT owns the capabilities. Can I do this? How can I do this? How can I integrate between systems, and how does it perform? Right? And risk and compliance will own the boundaries. That means what it is allowed to do and how can we prove that? right? And let me tell you this, all these three partners, none of them can be a silent partner. They have to be vocal, they have to be loud. That means an agent without a business owner is a science project. An agent without IT, it is unsupportable. Without risk, it is unshippable, right? That's how I look at it. And then the model I actually use is giving suggestions to the customer is very close to how we run high stake projects even today. That means you want an accountable owner from the business side who is really responsible for the outcomes, right? They cannot delegate that away, and they need to operate within the boundaries which are set by the risk teams and which IT enforces, right? So what I would say is when you are ready for deploying the agents in production, you should be able to very clearly map the ownership and the accountability between business, IT, and risk. And if you're not able to do this, you're not ready to deploy it.
So we've talked about the components, we talked about the ecosystem, we talked about sort of first principles. So now we're getting to the point where you're going to press the button to go on this.
Okay.
So I'll ask you this question first, Andrada, which is there are customers out there who are doing this the right way. Is it just as simple as just take our advice? Like, did we miss anything? Is there something customers should be doing to make them successful today that we haven't talked about?
So I think like across the board and industries, three themes that I see emerging: what makes a customer successful versus stumbling or like stuck in the sandbox.
Yeah.
I think number one is when this AI strategy is not just driven by an AI group that isolated, that's just like the cool kids. They're just doing their own thing, because there is also a lot of resentment if somebody just like isolates the cool stuff, right? And you also have to make sure that the rest of your organization is ready and excited to go on the journey with you. So I actually think it creates sort of this urgency for the leadership of a company to all come together and agree on this AI strategy, because it's a bit different than any other transformation I think I've experienced in the past, where it touches just one piece of the company. It actually goes across the board. So everyone has to feel engaged, has to feel like they have a say. So just doing it all together, that's number one. I think we talked a lot about models, like just don't focus on the models. And don't get me wrong, I love the models. I'm spending nights just playing with it, like setting up my Apple Mini and like just doing everything. And I know I'm not talking just about myself, but just focusing on the model is not enough for an enterprise. Where the hard stuff is actually where the success lies, like bringing together the operational model around it, not just what's the cool model that I can use today. Again, going back to what I said at the beginning of the episode, things change so fast. You cannot just place your bets on just one model.
Yeah.
And I think third is, you mentioned it as well, like there is this rush going to like autonomous, like an agent doing it all. And if you think also about the evolution of the models, we started with like, let's challenge this model to see if it has an answer for me. Then we got smarter and we said like, let's have the model pretend they have these skills and they can like give me something. They can, but truth is, it's still going to be theoretical. And now if you look at what's happening in the industry, we went past the prompting just for the sake of prompting, you read my mind, but we're prompting more for the loops, and humans have to be part of it, because also what works in one enterprise doesn't work in another one. And truth is, like, AI will give you a recommendation on what the strategy could be, but if you don't have the humans with the right institutional knowledge to validate the thinking and to actually bring it to life, you are not far along the way.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you say, because I mean, I've, like you're saying, like we're all experimenting with these models. We're all playing with Claude or GPT or Gemini, whatever. We had this exercise as a team where we were in Romania, and we spent a day and a half basically playing with models. And the idea was like, what are the things that we could do? I work in marketing. What are the things that we could do in marketing that we could potentially transform using AI? And so we all had this like individual exercise where you were basically said like, okay, pick a process that you do every single day, that your team uses every single day, and try to figure out if that's something that you could actually turn into. You could build an agent, and that agent can then do it. And what's really interesting is, yes, you could put in the prompt and you ask a couple of questions and it gives you a recommendation. And then you start to poke at it. And then it pokes back. And that's where I think it gets really exciting, because then you get to the point where like, that's where you can really start to understand the difference between success and failure from pilot to production. So Having gone through that experience myself, I'm really curious to hear like what you would have to say, Simi, because you've been through this experience. I imagine probably dozens of times, just done hundreds of times, in talking with customers. What are the organizations that will successfully scale AI? How will they get out of that pilot like purgatory? How will they get to production?
Yeah, seen it multiple times. So I would say three things. And let me be very clear, none of them is about AI, right? So the first thing is the order in which they did all the things. What that means is the teams which are stuck in pilot, they build the capability first, and then they try to put the governance around it, to realize that the architecture is so hardened at that point based on the assumptions which are not coordinating with the audit teams. So now they go into rebuilding it, right? And the teams which have scaled and designed, scaled well, they have designed the audit, the controls, the parameters first, and then they're building the capability within those parameters. Right? So if you look at it, the components are same, the orders are different, and the outcome is totally different. So that is the first thing which I'll say in the sense of what you're doing first and what is the order of things on how you are doing it. What is your focal point of orders, right? The second thing which I'll say here is that companies who treated this as an operating model change versus a technology project, right? And by that, what I mean is a pilot can prove the technology. It proves that the technology works. But now scaling that is an organizational change. What it means is like who owns it? Where is the ownership? Where is the controls? Who approves it? Who monitors it in production? So if you are trying to make this organizational problem a technology problem, you'll never get there, right? You'll be running four or five pilots and you'll still be there because you're never going to scale anything by a different technology, which you were not able to scale by a first successful technology. So that's the second thing which I'll say. And then the third thing, and this one is a little underrated one, but I call it the translation layer. By that, what I mean is that the bottleneck around the model is not there. There are people who will train the model, who will make the model intelligent. Those people are existing. But the companies who invested into those transitional layers, who can sit between the risk people and the ML engineers and have them communicate with each other, is the key, right? So the organizations who were able to invest in those people well scaled pretty well. So those are the three things which I'll say. But now, if I fast forward a couple of years, this gap, there won't be any gap where companies will have a good AI or a bad AI, because that's going to be same for everyone. Everyone is going to have access to amazing models. But what will differentiate them is who was able to make it an organizational scalable program versus who was still sitting in IT as a transformation project.
Yeah. I love that answer because it's a real, it really does get back to, I think, where we started this conversation, which was this is a transformational moment, and it's transformational with a capital T. It really is. It's not just, like I said earlier, you're not just plugging in a new piece of software. You're not just adding a new partner. You're not just hiring a new team or just like having risk and IT meet for the first time. You're doing all of the things.
Yeah.
And you're doing them all at once. And you're doing them with intention. I think that's a really powerful message I want to get across. I really want to thank you guys for this. This is really fun. Really great conversation. A lot of stuff here people can take away. Thanks for listening to The Path Forward. We'll see you on the journey ahead.